Great.
I know.
Doing something. Is the city one?
No, this is mine. This is the one that I could never connect before.
Great.
And that's started bringing the what's it, the iPad. Which I also brought tonight, but for some reason it likes me now.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. Folks can hear us in virtual space. Thank you for the thumbs up. It's good to see everybody. This is the 20th. All right, this is the 20th regular meeting of the Government Transition Advisory Committee. Today is Wednesday, May 15th, and we will be here from 6 to 8 p.m. My name is Julia Meyer. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Engagement and Community Participation Manager for the transition. Our new co-chairs, Amy and Juliet, will facilitate tonight's meeting. Next slide, please. I'm going to take a moment to go over some meeting logistics. This is a hybrid meeting. It's being live streamed on YouTube and recorded for later viewing. A copy of the recording will be posted on the city's transition webpage under past meetings and events. For today's meeting, we have closed captioning, ASL, and Spanish interpretation available. To access Spanish interpretation, please click on the globe icon on the bottom right of your screen and select Spanish. To access closed captioning, you can click on the CC button on the bottom of your screen. For committee members, please take this moment to change your chat settings to everyone so that folks listening in can follow along. And please remember that the meeting chat is part of the public record. For community members listening in, we have the Zoom Q&A feature available. You can submit questions or comments through the Q&A feature. We may not always live answer all of the questions, but we do read them and they also become part of the public meeting record. At today's meeting, we do have some time held for verbal public comment, but as a reminder, you could submit public comment at any time through our online comment form by calling 311 or by emailing us at transition@portlandoregon.gov. I'm now going to turn it over to Juliet to review the agenda. We can go to the next slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia, and good evening to everyone. Tonight's agenda includes committee business, public comment, committee engagement updates, draft recommendations from the budget work group on improving community engagement in the city's new budget process, draft recommendations from the districts and council operations subcommittee on future districts and council operations, and checking in on our recent budget advocacy and council's response to our existing recommendations. At the end of our meeting today, we will review our upcoming meetings. Next slide, please. Tonight, Brian is unable to attend and Monty will be arriving late. We need to first approve the April 9th meeting summary. Does anyone have any corrections to that summary before I entertain a motion? Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve that summary? And please announce your name if so, as you do so.
Jane DeMarco would do so.
Thank you, Jane.
This is Zach. I will second.
Thank you. All in favor? So we have Juanita, we have Fred, we have Jane, we have Terry, we have Zach, we have Amy, we have Destiny, we have Terry, we have Joe, we have me, and do we have Leah? Yes. Okay. I also have a member update. David Burnell has resigned and Bill Kinsey has been promoted from an alternate to a voting member. We thank David for his service and congratulations to Bill. Next slide, please.
Thank you.
Okay.
Our final order of business is to review our working agreements. In discussions, challenge ideas rather than individuals and offer constructive suggestions. Approach different opinions with curiosity and seek to understand. Keep the needs and concerns of the local community and the larger region at the forefront of the work. Arrive on time and prepared to the best of your ability. Let the group know if you cannot attend a meeting, and the co-chairs will aim to incorporate tools for breathers. Please keep multitasking to a minimum and keep your focus on the objectives of the meeting. Use the co-chairs to note additional topics for discussion by submitting topics in writing by email. Next slide, please. Honor the decisions of the group. Contribute to the overall success of the group by finding ways to participate that best meets your needs. Step up and step back. Collectively work to ensure that every member who wants to be heard is heard. Embrace conflict and work with your fellow committee members and staff to find ways to give each other feedback. The co-chairs will aim to incorporate various feedback tools and use I statements. Now I will hand this back to Julia to introduce the public comment.
Thank you, Julia. So community members were asked to sign up ahead of time to give public comment. I'm going to double check again, but I don't think that anyone has signed up to give public comment. So I'm going to do the awkward silence thing for a handful of seconds and just see if anyone who is in attendance wants to offer public comment. And if you do, you can raise your Zoom hand and we could promote you into the room. I'll give you a moment to ponder. Okay, see no hands. Appreciate the allowance of the silence. Just as a reminder, I'll speak for myself. I love public comment. So if you want to submit it in some other way, folks can call 311 or email us at portlandoregon.gov or go to the transition website and fill out an online public comment form. Thanks, and I'll pass it back to the co-chairs.
Thanks, Julia. So now is time for staff and committee members to share any new insights from their recent community engagement. And the floor is open for committee members to share reflections. I'm going to try to watch the real hands and the virtual hands at the same time. Anybody? I saw Amy has her hand up.
Yeah, I joined Jane a few weeks ago at Benson High School and got to see her speak to a room of high school seniors, and it was really great. Jane was a really talented teacher, and it was really an engaging session all about how the city government works, and it made me think about that we could maybe incorporate some more of that teaching around how the government works into our regular presentations, because it was kind of refreshing. She talked about the ways that revenue comes into the city, and the high school kids were honestly pretty sleepy, and there wasn't a lot of questions. I think it was the end of the day, so.
Destiny and then Jose.
Yeah, I joined June to visit the Division Midway Alliance, and I believe, took some of the practices Jane has been using in classrooms. So talk about revenue, but also city functions. And it was multi-generational, there was parents with their little ones, there was high schoolers, there was college kids, there was seniors, all in this same presentation. And it was great to see them interact about the city functions, and also the questions of well, why did transition happen? What were the issues? And then we talked about what are the proposed solutions? And so it was just really good, informative, just basic presentation. And yeah, I really did enjoy getting that, they fixed potholes. That was really great. And then the big budget. So it engaged people from multiple generations. We got really good questions.
Thanks, Destiny. Jose.
I got a chance to do a presentation that was completely different than anything I've done before. I met with someone from the League of Women Voters beforehand to talk about all the things they knew and they know a lot. So our basic presentation wasn't going to work. So we talked for an hour, we wrote down questions. I got more questions from more of their members afterwards. And then we put together a different kind of presentation that Shoshana was able to join me. And it was refreshing to hear a complete side of the city, the people that are very aware of everything that's going on. Their questions were very smart, and you could tell they had really put a lot of thought behind the questions and what they were looking out for. And it was good to know that there are people that are watching this process as well all the time. And because a lot of our presentations are a lot of people that don't know as much of what's going on, and those are the people we need to reach the most. But there's also the other side of it, right? The people that want to know the details and why we're doing certain things. It was a good conversation.
Thanks, Jose. We'll go to Lori and then to Bill.
I had a couple interesting interactions. I did a house party. A friend of mine was sitting at a dinner party at his house, and a bunch of people at the dinner party were complaining about the city and talking about the transition. And he felt like they really didn't know what they were talking about, and mentioned that he knew somebody that was involved and could come speak. So I came to speak. What was great about it is I used the posters that June has made up. There's 4 of them. And I just spoke to the posters. And so it was really informal, but they were very enlightened for these people who thought they knew everything about what was going on. Most of them didn't know about how our current government works or how our future government is going to work. So I thought it went really well. So I encourage you to mention it to your friends. It's a great way to have a really nice conversation. Also spoke to some small business owners. I've spoken to them before in the Northwest Industrial area. They also had some folks running for Multnomah County District 1 there, and a police officer that was there. So it was a multi-presentation, and I also used the posters to do that one, and it was at a big brewery. And they were really engaged and had a lot of interesting questions, mostly interested in how they interact with their council members as business owners. So that was good to talk to them. And then this week I spoke with the Native American Youth and Family Services, and that one was really all about, and it was great. June engaged with some city staff members who are involved in tribal relations, and they came to the meeting, both called in as well as were in person. So I felt like the meeting got a lot of really good support from the people that they wanted to hear from. And it was all about how will tribal relations be affected by this new form of government. So the folks that were there were able to speak well to that. And they're much less interested in the rest of it, but very interested in how tribal relations was affected by this new form. So very interesting. And thanks a lot. I wanted to pass on my thanks to June. She's just been amazing with handouts and posters and, all over it whenever I ask with very little notice. She's there to support me. So thank you.
Thanks, Lori. We'll go to Bill now.
Okay. Yes, thank you. In mid-April, I gave a presentation to a Zoom gathering of the Senior Studies Institute of Portland Community College, and June joined me. There were about 30 individuals, all very attentive, asked good questions, and we look forward to more detail about ranked choice voting and the upcoming elections. So I think we'll have a return gathering in September.
Thanks very much, Bill. So I don't see any other hands. I'll give an update. I have recently attended a Neighbors West Northwest Coalition meeting and a District 4 meeting, and then I met with the executive director of those two, which are going to be kind of the same thing. And then also Todd Zarnitz, who's the president of Northwest District Association, but he is running the committee revising the bylaws for District 4, or the transition from the coalition to the district. And they're very concerned because a number of neighborhoods are now wanting to switch out of their assigned districts to others. And it's an awkward timing because they're trying to nail down bylaws, a work plan, and a budget due to the city in June, and they just wish everybody would stay put and kind of figure this all out later. So, and they're told that there's a city process that's not clear, so there've been a lot of questions about that. I've talked to a couple of city council candidates about it as well. So I've been working with Julia to track down more information. So that's happening. Terry.
Now that you mention it, I presented at Reed Neighborhood Association, which was a great neighborhood association type of meeting, maybe 20, 25 people there. They are reviving themselves after COVID. They were very happy to have us speak. I spoke with James Eccles from the elections office, who gave a good, solid RCV discussion. But the neighborhood thing came up, and they are one of the neighborhoods that were moving out. And they had pretty strong reasoning. And I think Southeast Uplift, again, over on the other side of the river, is helping them move out of the west side. So that is something that is collateral to the transition, but it's something that civic life has got to sort out soon.
Appreciate that. All right, we'll go to Joe.
I just want to clarify, as Julia did for the group, that these aren't neighborhoods that are moving out of the district. They're wanting to move out of the, what do they call the coalitions that are serving the neighborhoods. And they'd rather be in the ones that are geographically more proximate rather than the ones that they share a district with.
Distinction. It gets a little confusing. All right, any other reports? That's great. Thank you very much. So next slide, please, and I will turn it over to Amy.
Thanks, Juliet. So today's meeting is largely focused on considering voting on two sets of draft recommendations. The recommendations for improving community engagement in the city's budget process and the draft recommendations for future districts and council operations. Next month in June, we'll share the draft recommendations with community to gather input through mid-August. We will then evolve our recommendations based on that community input. In September, we finalize our recommendations. We are first going to consider the draft recommendations on how to improve community engagement in the city's new budget process. Next slide, please, and I'll turn it over to Terry, who's the chair of the budget work group, to present the work group's engagement work to date and draft recommendations. Please hold your questions and comments until Terry is done and put them in the chat, and we'll get to them at the end.
Okay, so that's us, our tiny little work group of Zach, Fred, Annie, and myself put together some budget suggestions. And I think we've got a good set of recommendations, and you should have received a document that fleshed it out quite a bit. So I'm not going to go into the document unless you force me. And I'm prepared to do it. But anyway, thanks for that. So next slide, I guess. Next slide. Slide after this. There we go. So this is where we started. This is our vision statement for what a better budget process would look like. Amplify Portlanders' voices in the city's new budget process, grow our democracy, promote the public trust in city finances and making budget policy, increase public awareness and understanding about how our city budget process works, and improve city decision-making and responsiveness to community interests and concerns, which I think is good. And it covers, I think, recognized weaknesses in our current process, and it recognized some of the research that we did in other cities' budget processes that were oftentimes better than ours. But this is the vision. So next slide. And so I'll walk through. The next two slides are a sort of proposed process. This is initially a trial balloon that we sent up so that insiders could take a look at and tell us whether we were crazy or not and whether it sort of fit. But it's based on best practices elsewhere that we found during research. What we're currently doing in the city, what they're currently doing up the street here, and the current process that they're using to pass a budget. And also trying to leverage what our new committee forward council structure might be. So those sort of three things, we came up with an annual schedule for the budget. And this is what it is. And I'm not going to walk through it all the way. But it starts in the summer with an economic outlook. They're going to look and say, what's the next year going to look like? What are our revenues going to look like? What are our spending challenges going to look like? That's typically just a work session in the city council. Well, if you're going to have a work session in the city council over the economic outlook, why not hear something from the public? So we would layer a public comment in the council committee related to finance that would be listening to that economic outlook briefing. So that's the sort of thing how we're layering things over the top. The next thing that happens in our process is the current appropriation levels where city bureaus and budget drafters sort of set where the current appropriation is and where it might head into the next budget year. Other cities have called something like this a trial budget, and it puts the trial budget out front. It lets everybody see what everybody's working with, and it starts the early consideration of the budget process. So why not, when you're briefing the CAL levels, open that up to public comment, create the trial budget and put it out into the public, reach out to the advisory bodies and community-based organizations and saying, look, budget process is starting. Here's our starting point. Now's the time to start thinking about it. Okay. December, there's the mayor's initial budget guidance. Again, that's typically a briefing or maybe only a memo. Have some comment about that. There should be a way that the public can engage at that point. Likewise, the economic forecasts in December, brief the council, brief the appropriate committee. But if you're in the committee, hear from the public, see what they have to say. And then it gets, much more intense in January and February, where the mayor's budget guidance is out, the trial budgets are out, the bureaus are starting to write their detailed budgets to go into the service area budgets. That's a good time to listen to the public in a formal town hall setting, sponsored by the new districted council members, a resolution from the full council that puts the schedule out, and advisory bodies can start weighing in on what the bureaus are doing. Then February, March, service areas are submitting their budgets. This is when we have seen the council hold workshop sessions. If you're going to hold a workshop or work session, hear from the public, because they're going to be hearing this stuff, what the bureaus are planning on doing at that early stage. I think it's really important. That's when we were taking a look at what the budget processes were. And that, I think, is probably the most important time to get engaged, is when the budget is actually being drafted in those early stages. Okay, so next slide. And so this part is basically the legislative process. And this is where we are now in the current budget cycle. But the mayor's proposed budget is released, and it would be referred to, in our new council, the committee of the whole. And that should be briefed to the council, but it should also be open to public comment on that initial stage. Then the typical legislative processes, but maybe subcommittee hearings, hearing the detailed service area budgets in the appropriate subcommittees, and hold hearings. And when I say hearings, I mean public comment. Hearings have apparently a specific term of art that is different from having public comment. Then the committee of whole would hold its initial hearing, and then a separate meeting to assemble the amendments and hear the amendments. Then it goes to the Tax Supervision and Conservation Committee. All of these things they're doing now. These are all formal in the state's budget law. But I think every time that the council is making a decision where they have to raise their hand and something, there should be an opportunity for public comment. And then finally in June, the final budget hearing with a final effort to make changes in the budget with some public comment. Okay, so next slide. So that's the process. And that's floated. We floated that to, well, okay, let me stop here. With this chart here, built into our process, there are some communication tools that we came across and we recommend highly. This should probably say, communications tools include, but aren't limited to the following. But we saw these as being used elsewhere to some success. Okay, then the next slide. So we floated our trial balloon. We floated some of our recommendations, and we put together a survey to put out to city advisory committee members, budget advisory committee members in the bureaus. The citywide folks, we sent it to city staff who could look over what we were doing. And we got good responses, very, very interesting and useful responses. So next slide. So you'll see in a minute one of our recommendations, but more and earlier engagement was popular among our survey participants, that they thought, yeah, that might help. That might help the process. So provide early, accurate, accessible information, and community relationships are likely to improve engagement. Those polled well in our survey. Likewise, providing clear guidance on the community roles and involvement. Budget advisory committees need improvement. Came out of the survey, sort of a lack of training and information available to be useful in the budget process. Lack of authority and uncertainty whether leadership considers recommendations. This is specifically to the budget advisory committees, but also just generally. You don't really know if you're being listened to at any point in this process. And then just provide more time. Again, the legislative part of it is very compressed. And that's, from May till the end of May. And that's a lot of money being shoved around with very quick turnaround. So anyway, those were some of the survey findings that I think were useful. Next slide. Okay, so these are the recommendations. And these are, with the document that we put out, these are like the headline, the topic sentence, the bulleted elements. And underneath of these, we have some more details that flesh it out what we mean. But these are the recommendations that the committee or work group is going to put forward tonight for GTAC approval. First, start the engagement earlier and diversify the methods for input. And again, our process tries to do that, but there are some other things that we can do to make that better. Build and maintain relationships with community-based entities with a focus on communities traditionally left out of City Hall and city decision-making. I mean, budgets have real-world impacts in communities of all shapes and sizes, and we're not talking just geographic communities, but ethnic communities, issue group communities. And those relationships are where budget drafters are going to get good information. And so it's something that seemed clear that in the budget process, some of those relationships should be nurtured so that we can get better information earlier into the process. 3, provide accurate and accessible budget information. And some of this is the communication tools, but some of it is just being straight and being clear and putting it out early so that people can understand it. 4, centralize primary responsibility for design, coordination, and implementation of community engagement in the budget process in the city administrator's office. Some of the research that we did in cities that we thought had great budget processes had a centralized engagement entity that did the work to make sure that the engagement happened. Creating the tools, creating the communication elements, hosting neighborhood meetings, hosting town halls, creating all sorts of new opportunities, managing things. It just seemed our budget office is too busy doing number crunching to be also doing the engagement. That's not to say they shouldn't be there listening to the engagement. They need to understand what we're saying. The decision makers need to be involved in the engagement, but making it happen probably was best in a centralized engagement entity, which dovetails with our community engagement discussions that we've had here at GTAP. Communicate openly and honestly with the public and ensure feedback loops. Again, be honest if you're going to have a bad budget year. Be honest about how bad it's going to be and get it out there early so people can understand it and work with it. But also to the problem of not knowing whether your input is heard or dealt with, create the feedback loops so that decision makers can respond to comments and help the community understand what the decisions are. 6, host in-district budget town halls. This we saw elsewhere with districted council members. They were hosting town halls on the budget. It makes great sense. It's great community involvement by a districted council member. They should enjoy this. But it just seems like a good practice that we should recommend from the start. And then finally, dissolve bureau-specific budget advisory committees, explore service area advisory committees, and assess and revisit the citywide community budget advisory board. From our survey and from us trying to figure out what these budget advisory committees do or did, it seemed like it was ripe for an overhaul. With the new service areas, with new districted counselors, new deputy city administrators, all of this should probably just be part of a reconsideration of budget advisory committees. I think they're valuable. I think budget committee members thought they could be valuable or should be valuable, but they weren't at the moment. So this is where we came up. I think it's a recommendation. It's like an internal transition-y sort of thing, but that whole process needs to be fixed, and now's a good time. So I think that is my speech. I will take questions if you dare.
Almost exactly 15 minutes, Barry. Great job.
Hey.
You chose peace.
You didn't think you might do it.
So we have about 15 to 20 minutes for this discussion. Okay, I'm just going to take it as the order on my screen because I missed the order. So we'll take Zach, Destiny, Lori, Joe, and Juliet.
Could we actually have it on the last slide? So I just wanted to add a little bit of additional context with this recommendation 7. We obviously, as part of our survey, we were reaching out directly to budget or budget adjacent advisory committees. And I did have multiple interactions specifically with the Civic Life Budget Advisory Committee. Just by association, I've been involved with them on occasion and presented to them. And, you know, the concept of being broader was attracted to them. I will put a caveat note that Civic Life especially is kind of a unique case study because it's not in a focus area. And so like, where does that fit? And I don't know if we have like a specific recommendation per se in that, service area, right? And so, but, you know, they were generally receptive to that. I think the other piece of this that I wanted to highlight within thinking about our timeline, we had identified, I think, getting the budget advisory committees involved kind of in a December timeframe, if I recall correctly. There was generally an ask to, if we're doing advisory committees, to extend them and incorporate much more training. That can obviously be focused within that specific budget advisory committee or a broader budget 101 kind of thing that could be public. So just wanted to offer that. But generally they were pretty excited that we were dipping our toe in the water on this piece.
Thanks, Zach. Destiny, go ahead.
I had just 2 questions. One is, when we send this recommendation, who do we need the buy-in for? And then the second one is for in-district hosting. I'm wondering if we could add another one that says once the budget is proposed, they go back to their district to then get more like detailed feedback again.
Yeah, I think to the second thing, I think that's fine. I mean, I think our recommendation for the in-district town hall sort of thing is like a bare minimum. I think council members would do well to circle back, but in some ways, you know, that's up to them. We can't sort of make council members do things, but I think that's good advice. As to who needs buy-in, I mean, obviously we need buy-in from the budget office. We hoped to have had maybe more input into what we were doing when we were sending out the trial balloons, but they're a little busy. But I think, you know, we have time over the summer as we put this out towards for our broader community engagement to circle back when they have some breathing room after they return from vacation, to discuss it in some detail. I mean, the interesting thing too is that we could implement some of these this fall, because this fall would be the budget that the new council adopts. So if the budget office is interested and sort of like some of these ideas, we could probably start implementing them sooner.
Okay, Lori, go.
Yeah, this is probably really a small thing, I think, and maybe clarification on intent. On number 2, I'm assuming you're meaning with an additional focus on communities traditionally left out. I think there's so much opportunity to build and maintain and then educate the whole community. And so I didn't want it to read as if we were really just focusing our efforts on communities traditionally left out, because I think everybody needs to get a lot more engaged. So I would have proposed with an additional focus on communities, unless I missed the intent.
I think that's a good edit.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Great. Joe, you're up.
Um, I think I want to start out by seconding what Lori said and, harkening back to that dinner that she talked about where these people felt very knowledgeable. I'm sure that they were not underrepresented people, and yet they didn't have a clue. And so, limiting our education efforts to people who are traditionally underrepresented is going to miss a lot of people who are important and influential. I just wanted to kind of think out loud a little bit about the council's role in the budget as it's getting formulated, since it's the mayor's proposed budget. And I wonder, and I don't really have, I've been thinking about this now for about 32 seconds as you talked about it, but it seems like it has potential to get very political very early. And of course, it's the budget. Of course, it's political. But I want us to be thoughtful about the role of counselors during that period when the budget is being formulated. And then one just tiny comment is that when we talk about the budget in the council committee structure, we ought to make sure that our recommendation about the council committee structure, which is the other one we're going to talk about later, is consistent with what we say here.
Those are two good points. I would say, let's see, yes to the committee structure thing. I think I have a proposal to sort that out in the next in the next half of the meeting. And yes, the political nature of the budget will probably be more intense with more council members meeting early and holding work sessions and subcommittees and trying to represent their districts. I think it's going to happen. The other thing that I would point out, though, with the mayor's proposed budget is that the mayor will no longer have a veto. So it's going to be the council's budget. The council, what the council decides to do, they're going to own it, and the mayor's not going to be able to do anything about it. So I kind of feel like the council should be involved earlier. And I think we set that up in the February, March work sessions in subcommittees so that they all start understanding what's at stake. So I'm trying to avoid the politics. I'm not sure that's going to be possible, but I think putting it in the committees is where it belongs.
Yeah, he does. I've got Juliet next.
I have the same question that you put in the chat, Amy, which is which cities stood out as having really good community engagement processes for the budget?
Top of the head, Austin had probably among the better ones. Now,
Yeah.
Seattle was pretty good.
It was like a San Antonio, wasn't it?
San Antonio, yeah, the Texas was doing it big. There were some that were bad, and those were the ones that didn't have any sort of centralized and sort of relied entirely on a districted council member to do whatever they decided to do.
You really need both.
Yeah, but I think it might have been San Antonio's that had the districted town halls. Each district had a town hall that was organized by the central entity, and they had huge turnouts, hundreds of people, and it was just a big, lawn signs, posters. It was really impressive.
Food, drink.
I know how community engagement works.
So good.
Yes.
Destiny, back to you, and then.
I'm wondering if we could add in this recommendation letter some of that context, because I feel like people, especially political facing people, really want to hear about the positives and the clear negatives. Like, the poorest community engagement is when you don't have centralized communications. Like that's a great case and much more persuasive to this recommendation.
I think that's a good, and we'll have to think about how to do that, but having some of our research stand out a little bit more, because the research was great. It was good fun and very interesting. So I guess at this point, to move it along, I'll move these recommendations to include these edits. Is that where I'm supposed to be?
We have one
Yeah,
more
one
comment.
more.
Yeah, okay, Jane. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, thanks so much. I just want to piggyback on Destiny's comment and hope that we can get in our recommendations this centralized community officer as soon as possible. The next batch of recommendations we're going to look at has even more community outreach opportunities. And if we don't get the person hired and start this process ASAP, and it's budgeted, then you know what it's just going to be is a bunch of recommendations to do nice things with the community. But community outreach is exactly like any planning function. You know, we don't guess at how we're going to build a roundabout or put in an intersection. It's known what to do. And the reason that the places in Texas have done a great job is because they've got a phenomenal community person centralized that's orchestrating this. And this person really needs to be on board way before January when all of the new all the new council people come on board, because those council people are going to want to run off and run their own meetings, and it does need to be organized. So I say this over and over again, please hire that person soon. And then the other piece that we need is we really need an out-facing public relations person. We need that communications person about the same time too. We're spending a lot of time and money on internal planning and not much time and money right now on out-facing to the community. So that's it. Please put that in. Thank you.
So yeah, I'll throw it back to you, Terry, if you wanted to make a motion, unless anybody has any other comment. We've got a few more minutes for public comment.
Yeah, I guess the next steps are, we take this, we'll rewrite the document with your suggestions, and then it goes out to the public for the summer to comment on and gossip about, and take to their garden parties. So that's what we'll do. And I think all these suggestions are good. Between Julia and I and the team, I think we probably got them here in our notes. And so with that, I'll move these recommendations as amended by the group.
I second the motion.
And then we have Juanita for a second. Do I see your hand up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing occurred to me. Bill Farber was a member of this committee when we started, and he has, deep, long, extensive history in budgeting. And I wonder if he'd be willing to talk with us if it would be worth running the recommendations by him. I mean, he's done this in a number of different jurisdictions.
I'm happy to do that.
Yeah. Bill actually did a recommendation to the council, this council, Mayor Wheeler and the council 3 years ago at their request about how they could improve the budget process. Of course, nothing happened. Which is why he was, I think, disgruntled about the scope that they gave us as a committee. Why he left, but I've been meaning to reach out to him. I had his document and I can't find it in my computer and meant to get it because it was it had a lot of what we're recommending in it. And I think Bill would be a good resource for us if he's willing.
Yeah. So we'll fold reaching out to Bill perhaps as part of the recommendation. So we've got a motion on the floor to pass these recommendations. So we'll take a roll call vote to vote on this. So Leah.
Love being first to say yes.
Jane.
Yes.
Jose. Jose?
Yes. Sorry, it's a lot harder to find the button when you're at home.
Moni?
She's on her way.
Oh,
She's, yeah.
not here? Terry?
Yes.
Lori?
Yes.
Julia?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Zach?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Destiny?
Yes.
Fred?
Yes.
Me, yes. Juanita?
Yes.
And Amy Wood. Maybe isn't here today. So with 2 absences and 13 yeses, the motion carries. And I'll now turn it over to Jose, the chair of the Districts and Council Operations Subcommittee, to present the subcommittee's engagement, work to date, and draft recommendations. Same as before, please hold your questions and comments until Jose is done, or put them in the chat and we'll get them at the end. Jose.
Thank you, Amy. First, before I start, my laptop just sparked and went half dark. So if I cut out mid-presentation, I apologize. Like, I don't know what happened. And also you might hear my voice a little bit under the weather. But I just want to thank, first of all, the Districts and Council Operations Subcommittee for their work. Amy Rendell, Destiny, Joe, Juanita, Juliet, Lori, Terry, and Zach. We met 7 times beginning in November to get our draft recommendations put together. We did conduct research on 20 different peer cities and reviewed past community input related to our areas of work, and conducted early community engagement primarily through community listening sessions and a community survey. Next slide, please. We believe that our recommendations should advance outcomes that Portlanders have told us that they want, for the city to be coordinated, accountable, accessible, responsible, and equitable. Next slide, please. I will briefly review what we heard from Portlanders during our preliminary engagement, and how that informed our draft recommendations. The full report on all of those findings can be found online. Next slide, please. To inform our subcommittee's initial recommendations on district and council operations, GTAC and the transition team hosted 3 listening sessions, 2 employee town halls, 1 employee briefing, an online survey, and like always, we received public comments. By the nature of the engagement methods, the feedback received in the listening sessions, the survey, and the public comment, it was much richer than the information from the city employee town hall and briefing. Next slide, please. These engagement efforts included an educational presentation, and then we posed 6 different questions, and I know a lot of us were at different one of these. The questions focus really on people's lives, people's lived experience contacting city council members, the challenges they faced engaging and staying informed with the council, then how they hope for the future and how their councilors will engage or represent their districts, how they wanted to give public input in the future, and also considerations for the different council committees. Next slide, please. Well, what we heard is that respondents desire council's new legislative process to really have a lot more accessibility, communication, transparency. We want to prioritize district engagement, improve citywide collaboration, and have community informed and accountable council committees. And now briefly summarize each of these themes. Next slide, please. The number one experience responders expressed when trying to contact city council was a lack of responsiveness and accessibility. Many expressed inaccessibility of council sessions, including the physical location of City Hall and time of day. Another barrier was a lack of understanding of the city council and the city staff decision-making. Next slide, please. One of the key takeaways from community feedback was the need for clearer communication and a centralized information about the council and community, make it a lot easier to access all that. Many commenters shared that the current communication methods, like the city website and the council agendas, really acted more as a barrier to participate. The various siloed places information is located across on the city website makes it really challenging and overwhelming to use. Those are some of the comments we were receiving. And also that the council agendas were difficult to sort through to really understand what is being decided on and when it's being decided. Next slide, please. Another barrier to the council is a perception of unaccountable decision-making and a lack of a transparent process. Many commenters shared their belief that the public input does not impact council's decisions. There is a perception that council members prioritize the interests of specific groups, such as the nonprofits they fund or those with greater financial resources, over the broader community. Commenters also highlighted the frustration of engaging with council when agenda items change last minute, and without them sharing the reasoning behind those changes. Next slide, please. Community members shared varying perspectives on where future councilors should focus their time and attention between districts and City Hall. The majority of voices were heard in the limited engagement period. They really want the councilors to be spending time outside of City Hall, in their districts, actively engaging with the residents of their district, which is what we've been talking about all along. So engagement did include attending and hosting events like specific town halls, newsletters, office hours. What we didn't specifically ask about in district offices, even though we feel like we will in the future, but surprisingly few people commented on them. Of those that did comment on offices, it was mainly residents of District 1 that expressed their desire for in-district offices more than the other districts, which I'm sure will surprise absolutely none of us. Next slide, please. Community members also expressed their desire to see collaboration and coordination amongst councilors to improve citywide outcomes. Some commenters suggested councilors should spend, like I said, more time at City Hall, and some wanted them to focus more on citywide concerns and be actively engaging with other councilors. Next slide, please. And finally, community members really expressed their preferences for giving public input to city council. Their feedback really suggested the desire to have their voice included a lot earlier in the decision-making process. Again, surprising, I'm sure. Many noting that they often felt like decisions were largely backed once they were discussed in council meetings. And the community also wants to see an increased accountability, suggesting tracking public input through various committees to ensure all decision makers hear and are responsive to community input. And finally, providing public input could be more accessible by opportunities outside the typical workday in the evening and on weekends, and not just in City Hall, to make it so more people can take part. And that pretty much is a summary of the community feedback that we collected. I will say you should check out the stuff online. There's a lot of information. It is beautifully put together. But now I'll move on to our draft recommendations. I'm going to present them slightly different than how they appear in the full recommendations document to focus more on the items that are connected to the experiences we heard from the people of Portland. So we have recommendations related to constituent relations, district engagement, public participation in city council decision-making, and council committees. Next slide, please. Council committees. The feedback we heard about council committees largely focused on ensuring committees were accessible to the community, had equitable representation, and were responsive to emerging community needs. One clear takeaway was the desire to see equitable representation of districts, subject matter expertise, and marginalized communities represented in council committees. There is also a desire for communities to have clear criteria, measurable outcomes, and timelines to increase communities' awareness and access to council decision-making. Oh, sorry, is this slide out of order? I'm getting a message. Yeah,
Keep going.
I'll continue. So the preferences on the council committee topics. So we know we talked about that. We got some of the preferences from the community. The most popular topics were livability, public safety, sustainability, and a little bit of governance. Many did not comment on specific committee themes. Instead, they expressed their desired outcomes from committee topics, such as preventing duplication of topics across committees and jurisdictions. So community members know who the decision makers are and where they can advocate most effectively. They wanted committees to ensure topics are selected in a way that distributes authority over city resources evenly. That there's a prioritizing of responsive committee topics and procedures. And finally, with limited resources, really prioritizing transparent and accountable committee processes over a set number of committees or specific topics. Next slide, please. Thank you. For constituent relations, we recommend a centralized system to track all city questions, requests, or issues. A website that allows community to easily follow council activities. A unified public input system where you can find and participate in the city's current opportunities that provide feedbacks on programs and projects. And we saw a lot of examples of these systems in different cities we researched. So we know that the software is out there. Next slide, please. For public participation in city council decision-making, what we recommend is public input on policies be given primarily in council committee meetings versus the full council meetings. The council should solicit input outside of regular council meetings. That public comment on items not on the council's agenda still be allowed during full council meetings. And finally, that diverse perspectives and lived experiences are represented, and that communities historically left out of city hall decision-making have meaningful representation and decision-making power on the committees. Next slide, please. And for district engagement, we recommend that councilors hold regular office hours and town halls in districts, attend community events in districts, provide regular, predictable, district-specific communication through newsletters, social media, and websites, and spend time in temporary low-cost offices in their districts before a permanent decision on district offices is made. As you can see, these are pretty much exactly what people were requesting anyway. We also recommend that the city conduct a robust community engagement process to determine what programming, including district offices, Portland is really wanting their district. Next slide, please. And for council committees, we recommended that council committees have 46 members with a representation from each district in every committee, which I believe is already a requirement, that each counselor holds an equal number of committee assignments and at least one committee leadership role as chair or vice chair. That the standing council committees, which don't align with the new service areas, include the committee of the whole, government, performance and finance, public health and public safety, transportation and infrastructure, community and community development, sustainability and climate, housing and homelessness, community engagement, equity and communications, with or without sustainability. And I will make a note that our subcommittee didn't have consensus on the standing committees. We both wanted to have 6 committees plus a committee of the whole, and we wanted to uplift the disciplines of community engagement, equity, and communications into the committees. We're interested in hearing non-subcommittee members' thoughts on this, because we didn't land on one solid consensus. And with that, thank you for bearing with me and dealing with my voice, but I'll pass it back to the co-chairs for the discussions.
Great. So we have, we're ahead of schedule, so we can take 20 minutes and have a little bit more time than that if it allows for discussion on this and any motions or recommendations.
Okay, that last slide with the council committees has been bugging me for weeks now. And I think I've figured out a decent solution, and I'm going to make a recommendation now to solve all of our problems. And so the idea here is, and I'll make it a motion, just let me get all the words out first, that our 6th and final committee be called Community, Equity, Sustainability, and Climate, which would include basically the jurisdiction in the org chart that's under the assistant city administrator, except for communications and government relations, which I think are different and should probably belong in the government performance and finance, or wherever the city administrator's office is reporting to in a council committee. And so that would be the recommendation. My rationale is that the way the org chart is developing, it's going to capture 3 of the 4 disciplines. I think it will also capture Portland Solutions, which I think is a citywide constituent service discipline in a way. And it solves our number of committees issues. It solves the name of the committee's issues. It's consistent with not siloing things. It would include, the other jurisdiction it would include would be civic life in this committee. And I just think, and it solves a workload problem that we heard about in some of the comments that we heard during the community engagement, that a couple of those committees are going to have a heavy workload and a couple of them wouldn't. But I think by consolidating these into one, I think that solves that problem. So that's my motion. Community, Equity, Sustainability, and Climate Committee, essentially combining the last committee on the slide and the second to last committee.
Just a process note before we have a motion on the floor, like we'll take the rest of the general discussion and then entertain motion.
Okay.
So we'll come back to the motion part of it. Yeah.
I'm just so excited.
Yeah. Appreciate it.
Too.
So any other just general discussion until we move to make motion? Yeah, go ahead, Fred.
Thank you. Am I? Is that Joe?
Okay, so I've got I see Fred in the room, Jane and Will.
Just to Terry's point, I'm reading this and I think, Jose, what I'm saying is that you say don't align with pre-existing service areas. You mean the service areas that are in the new reorg, right? The 6 service areas. And so these, to my estimation, our understanding, this is broader than trying to silo into those service areas or the specific disciplines that are within the assistant city administrators, but they're more broad. And so there's some cross-fertilization of ideas and issues. Is there a budget committee?
Speaking
I
as
think-
the
I think
budget
the
work
budget
group
committee will happen. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Terry.
Jose.
Sorry, Jose, I could,
Yeah,
the,
let's let Jose talk. Yeah.
government
Budget
performance and
committee.
finance.
The budget committee is required to be formed separately. It wouldn't be one of these standing council committees. It would probably be under.
You muted yourself.
Just mute yourself when you finish.
Sorry.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if Terry wants to tackle it, but I thought the budget committee would be a separate thing than these standing council committees.
Because you appoint it every year.
yeah, I mean, the state budget law requires it to be
Right.
the whole governing body. So that would be the committee of the whole. It's one reason why we have.
Can I respond
Yeah. go ahead.
to that? Earlier, there was a question about the budget, and I pulled out the section of the charter that talks about the mayor submitting the budget. And one of the lines there is the council functions as the budget committee.
Yeah, it's gonna be.
That's correct.
That's in the charter.
Mhm.
The entire council is the budget committee, so there's not a
Yes.
separate committee. Okay.
So they can assign it to the committee of the whole versus doing it as like a part of the regular council business.
Right,
Okay.
right.
Appreciate that question. Fred, do you feel satisfied with your?
Beg pardon?
Do you feel like you got everything? you need?
Oh, yeah, I think the committee of the whole is a term of art, and it's where there's more, less formal issues of motions and the like, and testimony. They can actually kibitz with each other and they can decide. But it doesn't have quorum requirements, any of the like. It can, in fact, maintain itself through the entire calendar year of budgeting. And that's where, of course, we want you to have some involvement with their own constituents and with the administrator and the mayor.
Thanks. Jane, you're up next.
Thank you. I thank you for all of this work. It's amazing. Under your document, standing council committees, number 3 says standing committees topics do not need to align with the initial service areas. And I see that there's a hope here of blurring those siloed lines. But while I was listening, I did go to San Antonio's website and take a look. And one of the things that they have done is that they have created standing committees based on the research of their community of what's important. And so given the fact that we've just had all kinds of things in the press regarding the state of downtown, that really and truly housing and homelessness and public health and public safety and cleanliness and graffiti and all of that kind of deal, that was the number 1 topic. Followed by violence, gun violence. So we can sort of wash it and say it's public health and public safety, but really and truly in these dire times, I kind of really feel that City Council should be creating committees that solve particular issues, which involve people from all of these disciplines meeting. So I'm just throwing that out, and thank you for listening.
Thanks, Jane. Bill, you're up, and then Zach, you're on deck.
This is a good discussion as to how to form these committees, because I admit I was thinking the were and should parallel the service areas. But I'm hearing a, some degree of preference that not take place. But I was thinking if they parallel the service areas, that would enhance coordination with the executive branch. I invite your feedback on that, Jose, or what you and your subcommittee were thinking as to whether it should parallel the service areas or be somewhat different for cross-fertilization.
Somebody on the committee want to address that?
I'm happy to.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is in part of my comment. So this is Zach, who's on the committee. So to answer Bill's comment or question, there's obviously a desire for greater accountability to the executive branch from this council, but also having them silent or kind of like assigned by the service area, like you were saying, doesn't allow for kind of a broader understanding of the problem, where we have these alignments to simplify the bureaucratic hierarchy, right, for reporting structure, but it doesn't necessarily equate to what constitutes the scope of a problem in a policy space. And so allowing the committee to discuss, deliberate all the different facets of the problem allows for kind of a more comprehensive solution set. And so I think that's the rationale there. And then to Jane's comment and about the topic areas of these. So I do acknowledge, like, there definitely are cities who have essentially re-identified specific committee topic areas based on the time and era that they're in. These are, not set in stone by any means. I believe the council president has the ability to essentially redefine committees. We just are trying to set kind of a goalpost of what we think are most appropriate to encompass the kind of historical emergencies and issues of the city that we've seen in the past. And so that kind of, as well as a comment, like accounting for the kind of whole picture of the services of the city. So yeah, that's all I gotta say.
Is there any follow-up questions about whether they align or any of that stuff? Okay, I had, Leah, you had your hand up. You want to?
I did, but my question was covered
Okay.
by what Zach said, so thank you.
I'll jump in. I wanted to comment, right, and then I'll let you get to me. I have some concern about saying that they should include, when we looked in the committee at other like jurisdictions, some had standing committees and some had like ones that form like ad hoc to address certain issues. And realistically, this recommendation is to give options to the new council. So I think saying should is kind of misleading because that makes it seem like there's like a right and wrong way to do this, or that there's like these have a specific bearing. So I just wanted to put that out there. Okay, Destiny, and then we've got Joe.
Can I respond to that really quickly? I just want to say in the draft itself, it says could.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That's what I was.
It feels important.
Good, yeah.
Okay, so maybe we on.
So I think it's just
Just to
a
align.
discrepancy within the slides.
Okay,
Okay, good.
so we will. Okay, that's great. Destiny and Joe.
I don't know if this is an appropriate time, but I would really like Terry, if this is an okay time, for Terry to kind of shortly explain the community engagement, equity, sustainability and climate, like on the org chart, because I found it. And now I wonder if you can briefly snapshot it so that I can look at it again.
Wait, can we pause until we entertain the motion? Because then we'll take discussion on the motion
Okay, yeah.
once the motion's on the table.
Got it.
Yeah.
Just think about it.
Yeah, go ahead, Joe, and then we'll move to the motion.
Yeah, Amy, I wanted to respond to what you said, and I think that it's pretty typical to have both standing committees and sort of ad hoc committees that arise as issues arise. I think it's a good idea to have standing committees and to develop some council expertise. And over time, ideally, council members will rotate and develop expertise in different areas and not silo themselves. So I think this is a really good way, not only for the council to function as policy body, but for the council members to really develop a broad understanding of the city and not just be sort of single issue focused.
Thanks, Joe. I appreciate that you said that there's both standing and ad hoc committees. Okay, so now with another general comment, we'll move to Terry's motion. So Terry, if you can just say again and speak to Destiny's question.
Okay, so again, our suggestion here is for 6 committees and a committee of the whole. The 6th and final committee would be combining sustainability and climate, and the final one on the board there. And I'd call it Community Equity, Sustainability and Climate Committee as a standing committee. And on the org chart, for those of you keeping score at home, this jurisdiction would be under the assistant city administrator. The jurisdiction under the assistant city administrator, but not including communications and not including government relations, but everything else, all of that jurisdiction would fall in this committee. So that captures three of the 4 disciplines that are being considered. And it would include Portland Solutions and Civic Life. And I think that covers community really well. It covers the engagements pretty well. It allows all of those things to have a clear jurisdiction in a committee. One thing to add to what Joe just said about standing committees, Austin was one of them, but a couple of the cities that we looked at, there was a line of code basically that said any legislation shall find a committee. Like some committee will have jurisdiction over everything. So everything can go to committee. And so it's trying to capture all of these things, and not enough, too many committees, you don't need them, but one of these committees should capture everything. It was part of the effort.
Great. So there's a motion on the table from Terry to make the 6th committee the Community Equity, Sustainability and Climate Committee in lieu of in lieu of the community or sustainability and climate and community development. So
Community engagement.
community engagement.
The third to last and the last bullet, basically combined.
Okay. Got this. Fred, what's your hand?
Well, I'm waiting for a second.
Oh, yeah, a second.
I second Destiny.
We have a second from Destiny.
So can I ask for a question for clarification?
Yeah.
So I'm not clear yet about, so you combine community development and sustainability and climate? I'm trying to understand, I apologize, but I'm not sure that I'm clear about the changes that are being proposed. Right now we have 7 committees plus the committee of the whole. So we will need to eliminate 1 committee. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm combining 2 committees to do that.
Which ones 2 are you combining?
The sustainability and climate and the community engagement, equity, and communications is the last one on the slide.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Fred.
Yeah, so I have problems with this, Terry, because as I understand what the recommendations are, you have some broader subject areas that cut across some of the disciplines and service areas that are in the reorg. And it's kind of making a committee of council members sort of being assigned directly to the deputy city administrators areas of sustainability, communications, equity, but not government relations. And I think that's maybe too narrow. I'd rather that the subject areas kind of stand alone. Sustainability and climate, I think, are so critical, especially to the world, but Portland in particular, and our city and our citizens. These others, I like the demarcation. Now, I understand that the council is going to decide what it wants and how it wants to separate out. I just don't like the idea of putting too many subject areas into one committee, especially when we're already saying that each counselor should have at least one committee leadership role as chair or vice chair. That's not going to be possible if we don't have enough committees.
Well, I guess the answer to that is that it works out perfectly with 6 committees. 6 committees, everybody gets a chair or a vice chair.
If they want to be on that committee.
But one of the things we heard was just balancing the workload versus what the actual council workload is. And what the actual council workload is a lot of contract stuff and a lot of the stuff coming out of transportation and infrastructure. There's a lot of churn of projects that need council attention. Sustainability and climate now has the Climate Commission, which it constrains basically what the council does. So the council committee on sustainability and climate, while important, is probably not going to be that busy compared to the other things. And I just think that in that portfolio under the assistant administrator is not well covered really by the other committees. And I think Portland Solutions in particular and civic life in particular are going to need detailed attention by a committee. And that would balance the workload problem. And it roughly mirrors some of the other public safety service area, the transportation and infrastructure service area, the community development service areas. Those big service areas have their own committee there.
So Civic Life and Portland Solutions would end up where?
In this new committee.
The new one.
Just to keep things moving along here. So the next folks I have was Jose, Bill, Juanita, and then Leah. And we're on the motion, the discussion over the motion, but also wanted to just bring folks' attention that there's 3 sets of draft recommendations. And so if there's other things people want to bring up, we'll address those after the motion. Okay, Jose.
Thank you. I don't really like the motion Terry made. I don't see sustainability, environment, equity, and community engagement all bunched together. But in my opinion, that's not even the real part. We just finished having a whole conversation about how we could include any of these committees and could be more, or it could be different ones. So why do we need to change or try to give them exact number? I actually like the fact that we're giving them one more than required to show that we're not trying to give them, these are the exact ones we think should be it, but these are what it could be. I don't think we need to come up with the exact ones. Within ourselves, we couldn't even come up to a consensus on the ones we thought it had to be. So I think it's a bridge too far for us to try to make these exactly right when we couldn't do it before.
Thanks, Jose. Bill.
Terry, I'm sensitive to the observation that it seems to a full subcommittee, perhaps majority view, if not unanimous, chose the language that we see on the slide. So with your motion, could I'd be interested in what other subcommittee members think about the change. I'm not sure whether the motion reflects a majority view of the subcommittee or a minority view. We did hear, Jose, but if others would like to contribute their view who are on the subcommittee, I'd welcome it.
Thanks, Leah. For Juanita and this, yes,
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'm very concerned about, we had this conversation before about the extent and the scope of community engagement. Especially, we've been talking to different committees about the need to centralize that piece, for the city. And so now if we add sustainability and climate plus equity and communication, I'm concerned that that specific area of community engagement will get lost. We'll lose the attention that needs to have. And so I just don't feel like I can agree to that because of that concern. I know that sustainability and climate, I don't know what else it will fit within the different departments, but ultimately I would rather support keeping the 7 committees than trying to just dump more work into one single committee.
thanks, Juanita. Leah.
Juanita basically just said exactly what I was going to. Thank you, Juanita. No, I'll just say I think I am comfortable handing our new city council more committees than they need and trusting that we're electing people that are smart enough to figure out what their constituents want, rather than, as Juanita said, putting a whole lot of really important topics into one bucket. But I appreciate the suggestion.
Thanks, Mani.
I know I've missed a lot, so this might be a dense question, but in your city research, are such committees not in code and legislated? Or it's up to the council to sort out what these
Every city does it differently.
Yeah, it's different in different cities.
Yeah.
Okay.
That information is in our research, I believe, but every city handles it slightly differently.
And the subcommittee's suggestion is that we recommend specific committees versus letting the new council sort it out.
I guess to wrap some of this stuff up, the new council gets to sort this out regardless what we do. I'd also point out that the transition thinks there are only going to be 4 committees that they're going to staff, which is not acceptable to me. I think the idea here is that, part of it is 6 committees is an elegant solution to a 12-member council to come up with standing committees. And I think, we are at the position where we're giving suggestions. Maybe the other way to approach this is we come up with 4 standing committees because that's all they're going to give us. And then supply them with the ad hoc committees that they're going to need anyway. And then that can go to 7 or 8 or 10 or 12, however committees. But I think my idea was the 6 would work for a 12-member council. It balances the workload. It combines things in a logical sense on the org chart that they're trying to develop. And it gives the council, when they get organized in January, a starting place. But that's, we're not deciding it, the council is. And I just think it was a nice, clean suggestion. If that's not what people want, that's fine. But I just point out all the other factors involved.
Sorry. Jose, I saw you as the last hand. Well, so this will be the last comment we'll take live on this, and then we'll vote on the amendment and then any other amendments and then the recommendations generally.
Yeah, I did just want to say that um because we couldn't reach consensus, I don't think it was ever the subcommittee's desire to prescribe exactly what the subcommittee should be, which is why we specifically chose the language that was chosen, saying could versus should, like Zach pointed out. So I don't want us to think that that's what the subcommittee wanted. I don't believe is what we wanted as a subcommittee. It was never my understanding that that's what we wanted.
Thanks, Jose. So with that discussion, we will take a vote on the motion. We'll take a roll call vote on it, and then we'll take other comment and vote on the recommendations generally. So Julia, sorry, I did your vote calling before.
You want to do it again?
I mean, sure. Okay. Leah.
No.
Jane.
No.
Jose.
No.
Mani.
What is the motion?
The motion is to combine the two committees, the House of Community Engagement, Equity Communications with Sustainability and Climate.
Versus what I'm seeing on the slide?
Yeah.
Can you come back to me, please?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Terry.
I vote yes.
Lori.
No.
Joe.
No.
Juliet.
No.
Zach.
I abstain.
Bill. You in meeting.
Oh, I am, no.
Destiny.
No.
Fred.
No.
Amy, I'm also no. Juanita.
No.
Amy W. not here. So with 10.
Money.
Oh, money. Sorry, thanks.
I abstain.
Okay, so with 10 no's, 1 yes, and 2 abstention, the motion fails for the amendment. Now moving back to the general discussion on the 3 draft recommendations of participation in city council decision-making, district engagement, and council committees. So if there's any other amendments, we'll take them at this time, or also constituent relations, and then we'll move to a vote to pass the recommendation.
Do we need to show the slides again? Or do folks know what these are?
Yeah.
Would love to see them again.
Go backwards.
Bonnie, go ahead.
Was in constituent relations, I think that was this, or maybe more so in public participation in city council decision making. Was it discussed at all to I don't know if this is worth having it here, but something around the process of how to make public comment, and that it's not as easy as just showing up and there's a process with it.
Sorry, Mani, I lost what you're saying because there's some stuff happening.
Oh, it's okay. I was just wondering with the public participation piece, if there was any discussion, maybe within the subcommittee and not tonight, around the actual process of making public comment. And that it's not as easy as just showing up at a meeting and being able to put your name in. That you have to, but there's just a process. I don't know if that process is changing in the new form of government, or if you all know. I don't know if that changed.
Does somebody on the subcommittee want to speak to that?
I can,
Jose, yeah.
I don't have the draft recommendation in front of me because technical difficulties, but yes, we go into detail about wanting to have a better process and a more robust process and an easier process to go through, including a whole system that lets you see all the committees and the different topics that you can speak on and ways to sign up. In our research, we found that there are numerous cities that even used similar systems that you could click next to topics and sign up for. Some of them could take verbal, some of them couldn't. A lot of them you can click and leave written comment to a specific topic. There are systems out there, and we did go into detail about wanting something like that for us.
Destiny and Fred?
Following like Mani's comment and point is that like the public participation, I feel like some of our recommendations, maybe this is like an edit, but I really think we should highlight the changes we want to see, like the actionable part, which is the next slide, I believe, which is the one where it says invest in the unified centralized system, track constituent activities. Like, I think that's the big thing that we need to highlight, that this is the change we want to see implemented. So when we put the recommendation forward, we're more organized in knowing that that's what we're tackling, and everything else is just justifying that.
So I think that counts as a friendly amendment or edit. Needs to be a motion.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Go ahead.
I comment on that. So the committee structure, which doesn't exist now at all, is all new. So even though it may be sort of, garden variety stuff, it is all new.
That too.
Now back to that previous slide. There we go. Number 4, it's problematical for me, the last 5 or 6 words, that these are council committees, and it's important to have to hear from and make sure that input is recruited or solicited from communities historically left out of decision making, so that they have meaningful, I don't know about representation on a committee. Or they certainly shouldn't have decision-making power on the committee unless they are a council member. And then and we hopefully will have some council members who represent communities historically left out of city hall decision-making. We certainly hope that, but I don't understand the making decision-making power as opposed to input, sitting in as advisors, something like that. I just don't get I don't think you can delegate the decision-making power to non-council members.
Thanks. Destiny?
Can I, so the context for that is that we've heard in one of the community listening sessions is that when we've been historically thinking about council subcommittees, we've only thought about it being comprised of council members, but instead if we invite like subject matter experts, maybe tribal relations, other government entities like Multnomah County specifically, things like that, or even like community leaders and advocates to compromise the council. Maybe this is just language that needs to change, so that they also be given decision-making power. But that's where that comes from. And I think that maybe I definitely don't think that's reflected in these recommendations.
So I see Jose's hand was up. I just want to note about time. We need to move to a vote on the general recommendations unless there's any more formal amendments. We'll just take the comments, friendly amendments.
Well, I can't vote for it without it, I guess. So I can't vote for something that's suggesting an illegal structure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I raised my
There's a
hand.
way to rephrase it so that you have their participation, but they can't vote,
Uh-huh. Terry, go ahead.
I would make that amendment, like formally, to just delete the last 5, 6 words there, delete the and decision-making power on committees.
Yeah.
Because
second.
That's the problem. It's an accountability to voters problem. It's just common legislative practice. No.
Right. I like meaningful representation is important.
So, does that satisfy if we delete that word and, or delete that phrase, and then does that satisfy, or do you feel like you are still?
I just keep context.
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
great. Okay, wait, is that okay as a friendly amendment, or does it need to be a separate amendment?
Objections.
Are there any objections?
The suggestion is cut it off at represented,
Yeah, representation.
Presentation.
Meaningful representation.
have meaningful representation.
Period.
Cut that part off?
No, just stop there.
Oh,
Delete
yeah.
and decision-making
And
power.
decision-making power on committees. Okay, with no objection to that friendly amendment. Oh, okay, we've got Terry and Zach, and we need to move to a vote on this, so keep your comments brief if possible. Go ahead, Zach, and then Terry.
I'll respond. Is that
Sure.
Yeah.
I just don't really see the whole point. I mean, we're going to have diverse perspectives by the geographic distribution. That's the whole point of this piece of having kind of a our council committee. We don't say it in any of the three other points that it should have a broad geographic distribution representation of every single district. And so I feel like that's answering that. Yes, I really agree with what Destiny is saying, that diverse perspectives is an all-inclusive word, and we really want to uplift that we are trying to advise the deciding-making power with people with lived experience and diverse perspectives. But this whole section is really about what I understand is the composition. It's literally within the draft council committee composition, ensure diverse perspectives. And so that is calling out that we should have all 4 districts represented in a committee. Unless I'm missing something, but
Terry, do you want to make your response?
well, I mean, I'm trying to understand. You can delete that whole number 4 if you want. If you're saying that it's just redundant that we have district representation and we with our 6 committees can ensure equal distribution of geographic representation across the committees. I think here's the confusion. Non-council members can't be voting on legislation. That's what we're trying to get across here. And I will say there is one of the cities that we looked at had council committees that included a bunch of other people on them, but I don't think they had the same legislative structure. They were all advisory.
Go ahead, Zach.
I'm having a really hard time with matching what's on the slides and what's actually in the draft.
Right.
Like that, I feel like is a problem where we're voting on something that we're reacting to on slides that's not represented in the draft. So I encourage people to revisit the draft that we're actually going to be voting on. Because there's not a whole piece on public participation in council decision-making. That line, ensure diverse perspectives, is explicitly stated under council committee composition.
Would staff like to speak to that, or is there anybody that?
I don't know if
speak
we've
to
missed,
that?
And the entire
phrase.
there. Well,
I can speak to, so the link to the document is in the chat. It was what was sent to you a week ago. And as Jose was introducing recommendations, he noted that they're not presented in their fullness, nor were Terry's when he presented. It's just a way to condense the information into a slide. So the fullness of the document that the subcommittee passed, that's in the link that you were sent a week ago,
is more important than a slide deck.
Yes. And
So-
so we should not be responding to this slide.
Right,
That's what we're actually.
But the written recommendation does say, and decision-making power on committees.
It does say that.
That-
It's about committee council. It's about council committee composition.
Right. And then,
In that case.
so then it would
Also-
be, then there'd be counselors, right, that,
There's some people with their hands.
I just want to remind us, I want to remind us that
Yeah.
we have we're 5 minutes overdue for this point to make a vote. We have Jose and Juanita who've been waiting, Jose, Juanita, and Joe. You guys could briefly share your comments and then we need to move a vote on this topic. And the vote we'll be voting on is going to be the document, not the slide. Okay.
Yeah.
Jose
Can
and
I come
Juanita.
really quick? We did vote before, and it was part of the recommendations in another area that the council committees should have representation from outside of the council with expertise in the subject that that committee is working on and those issues. So what is this? My understanding of what I'm reading here is that those committees, the council committees, are going to have, this is basically ensure diverse perspectives and lived experiences are represented. So I don't think it's appropriate for us to take the whole thing out. But I agree that, because that's basically what is meant to say, and we all agreed to that before in other pieces that we have passed and voted on. But however, I think that just in terms of the decision-making power on committee, if those committees are going to vote, those members are going to vote. So I will expect that in a council committee meeting, they're dealing with an issue, all of the representation that is in that committee, including the people with the expertise in that issue, will be voting too. So they really will have some type of power to contribute to pass decisions for that committee. It doesn't mean that after that committee take it to the policy council, to the city council, that they will not pass it, or they may decide not pass it because they don't like the recommendation from the committee. But in that level, yes, there will be participation from other people in the community.
Thank you. Jose and Joe, you have about 30 seconds each and then we need to move.
Yeah. I think we put decision-making power because we didn't know how the committees were going to be structured, if they were going to be legislative or if they were going to be how some cities, they're not legislative. They send stuff to the committee of the whole, which is just the council, and they're the only ones that actually vote things in. So that's why, but I'm okay with taking that out. I will say taking the whole thing out and saying, oh, it's not important because we would have things in place to make sure there's diversity. As a person of color who's in a lot of groups with lots of diverse people of color, systems that are set up to be diverse often fail. So I wouldn't want to just assume that it's going to be that way.
Thank you. Joe, go ahead.
So it feels to me that we're conflating two issues, and we might want to address either or both. One is composition. In the draft, one of the headings is council committee composition. The other is council committee structure and procedures, which is another heading. This happens to be under composition, and if what we want to do is talk about having non-council members somehow represented on council committees, we can have that discussion. Under the procedures, number 5 is ensure appropriate resources, including access to subject matter experts and those directly impacted by the issues. And when Destiny spoke earlier, she was saying that there's this dependence on subject matter experts and not enough on other kinds of expertise. And so it seems to me that if what we want to say is that these committees ought to be listening to diverse perspectives and lived experiences, and that communities historically left out of City Hall decision-making have meaningful voice in the process, that ought to go under the procedures part. And we can just, expand that point. Or if we want to say we want a composition that's different from just council members, we can make that point. I think what we're mostly talking about is the procedural one and not the composition. And so what I'd suggest is that we simply beef up number 5 by moving some of this language into there.
I second.
So we'll take Joe's recommendation then as a formal amendment.
If we need to change the language, yes, I'd make it as a formal.
Which page?
I have a friendly amendment to that, just to make sure that we also remove that and decision-making power on committees piece.
Yes.
Yep.
So essentially move the language that's in number 3 under composition and expand what's now under number 5. And I don't think we ought to craft the language now, but it basically says that we recognize that there's multiple kinds of expertise that need to be represented.
Leah.
I'm sorry, page 6.
So do we need to take a roll call vote on this amendment? Yes. Okay, so a roll call vote on the amendment that Joe just described, and then we'll take the overall recommendations as amended in a vote. So really, I will hand it back to you.
Okay. I'm gonna go backwards. Sorry, Leah. Amy is absent. Juanita.
You're on mute, Juanita.
Juanita. Juanita, you're on mute.
So moved.
I don't know how that happened. Anyway, so we're voting now?
Yes. Yeah, on the
Yes.
motion
My
only.
answer is yes.
Thank you. Amy R. Yes. Fred.
Fred, yes.
Destiny. Yes. Bill.
Yes.
Zach.
Yes.
Juliet.
Yes.
Joe.
Yes.
Lori.
Yes.
Terry.
Yes.
Honey.
Yes.
Jose.
Yes.
Jane.
Yes.
Leah. Yes. That passes.
And then we'll move for the full passage of all of these recommendations.
This is Zach. I'll move. I don't- we have to do this.
Second.
So we've got the motion from Zach and the second from Jose. And Julia.
Okay, I can't switch in order. Amy is absent. Juanita.
Yes.
Amy R.
Yes.
Fred.
Yes.
Destiny.
Yes.
Bill.
Yes.
Zach.
Yes.
Juliet.
Yes.
Joe.
Yes.
Lori.
Yes.
Terry.
Yes.
Money.
Yes.
Jose.
Yes.
Jane.
Yes.
Leah.
Yes.
That passes.
And we have about 10 more minutes of agenda left.
I think I'll just go through this information and then people will have to either put their comments in the chat or just follow up with email. So at our April 9th meeting, we passed a resolution about how we would advocate for our past recommendations related to council staffing, onboarding, community engagement, and district offices. Some of us testified on behalf of GTAC at the April budget listening sessions. On May 2nd, we received a written response from City Council related to staffing for new council offices, improvement to community engagement, and in-district offices. I believe Julia circulated that. Co-chairs, current and previous, testified again at the May 9th budget hearing. From council, we heard appreciation for our service and our thoughtful advice. The budget includes resources for the transition team, onboarding of the new elected officials, and the engagement officer position. The budget does not include resources for increased council staffing, temporary low-cost district offices, or money to engage Portlanders about what programming they want in districts. A couple of councilors addressed our recommendation for increased council staffing in the sessions. One councilor agreed that the staffing is inadequate, but in a tough budget year, believes it's more important to fund direct services. Another counselor believes we need time to figure out the right staffing levels for the executive and legislative branches and considered a budget note to reevaluate the levels sometime after January 1, 2025. A couple of counselors addressed our recommendation for temporary district offices. One counselor was supportive of district offices, but wouldn't choose cutting direct services to set up those offices.
Speak up a little.
Yes. Another counselor said there isn't money for district offices because counselors prioritize remodeling City Hall and that it is a task for the future council. The mayor acknowledged that the city won't have all the pieces in place on January 1, 2025, and that the new leadership will have to figure out how to right size the new government and how council offices will organize themselves. One counselor wished there were more opportunities to intersect with the GTEX work and expressed particular interest in the onboarding recommendations. Staff will schedule a meeting with the co-chairs and council offices. Today, council approved a budget note directing the interim city administrator to work with the current and new elected officials to hire an external evaluator to assess the organizational structure and staffing in the city administrator's office, deputy city administrator offices, city council, and mayor's office in the new form of government. The interim city administrator will present a draft scope of work for the evaluator to the current council by September 1, 2024. And we were going to have time to reflect on this, but if you like, I can send this narrative out over email and you can respond. As always, any questions asked but not answered, which is not going to happen right now during the meeting, will be answered in writing by staff. So any questions that you email us will be answered in writing by staff. Recording of this meeting will be posted on the committee's website and is available after the meeting ends on the Office of Management Finance YouTube channel. Wanted to let you know that at next week's council meeting, they will consider revisions to Title III, which is administration. These revisions relate to dissolving the Office of Management and Finance to align with the new organizational chart, implementing the DOJ's requirements for police oversight, and combining permitting services as directed by Resolution 37628. The revisions don't change 3.96 related to the Office of Community and Civic Life. The council materials will be posted on the clerk's website this Friday. If you have any questions, let Julia know. The next district and council operations subcommittee meeting is May 20. Did you have a question?
Yeah, could I just say one thing?
Yeah.
In that whole long thing, and I look forward to reading it and digesting it, you said one council member said that they want to work more closely with GTAC. I guess I'd like to know who that council member is, but I don't want to pass up any opportunity to work more closely with that one council member or all 5 council members. It seems to me that the closer we work with them and the more collaborative we are, the more likely it is that our recommendations are going to get some traction.
Can you say who that was, Julia?
Sure, it was a public meeting. It was Commissioner Rubio, but as Juliet mentioned, so I'm reaching out to all of the council offices to schedule meetings with the co-chairs and council offices.
Good.
So the next district and council operations subcommittee meeting is May 20. The next budget work group meeting is May 23rd. The next voter and candidate education and outreach subcommittee meeting is May 28th. And our next full GTEC meeting is June 11th. Next slide, please. And I want to thank everyone for your participation tonight. We're 5 minutes over and we're adjourned. And I will send out everything I just read really quickly so you can take time to respond.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.